was just so much time. And that's sort of the beginning of an answer to your concern.
It is not
There's a section in the paper where I review a lot of this stuff, and I talk more about the time in the Sierra, talking to people today about this very question, and not only talking to people who are more Indian looking, speaking, but also people who are mestizos, who have a very recent history of being in an area where there were a lot of native languages spoken, etc. So that part of the research is all in progress and could be approached in much more depth. So your question is very valid.
Okay, thank you.
Any other points? Yes.
Yes. I was just interested in to know, is there research being done today? And if so, what interaction? I know that the drug cartels are very big in that area, and the roads that are going, there's only one that goes. What kind of interaction, if any, plays in with the drug cartel and research that are being done in that area today?
I don't know the answer to your question. I do know researchers who are working in that area, Mexican and American research. It's an area of lively archaeological work, and I don't know exactly how the narcotraficantes affect this kind of work. I have the feeling that, to some extent, these people have been working in that area for a long time, and many of them are continuing to work there. But there's a whole school of researchers who, in Arizona, in New Mexico, and other areas, who are actively involved in looking at this area, as well as numerous Mexicans. And I didn't cover it in the report in the talk I showed you here today, but there's a lot of recent research.
But is there interaction with the drug cartel people to, say, felicitate access or being able to take some of these things and research?
I don't know the answer to that question. Yes?
Is that like somebody learn about how these individuals die? Is that explanation, or somebody study about how?
Well, they've fallen into kind of a. There's only one study that's been done on the remains, the X-ray study that I mentioned by these individuals back in 1972, and they did not record cause of death. They recorded some information about malnutrition, but whatever their cause of death was not visible on the skeletal remains or that part of the tissue that was still adhering. The mummies are pretty well preserved. There's a lot of tissue in addition to the osteological remains available. But no, we don't know too much about how they died. It appears that nothing really immediately visible. So they had a hard life, and there's a high level of mortality related to trauma amongst hunting and gathering peoples like this. They're not hunting and gathering people per se because they live on agriculture, but we don't have that much information, and probably very little, if any, is ever going to be done again, because they're now in a context where further research on them is considered to be not appropriate. Within the philosophy, within the kind of model of the museum, model of cultural studies at the museum today, that particular museum, that would not be, probably would not be supported without a lot more consultation from people who could be seen as their descendants, and that doesn't look like that's going to happen either. They're literally in a kind of limbo right now, if you know what I mean by limbo. Yeah.
I was absolutely fascinated by what you talked about, but it kind of struck me that what I hear is a conflict between academic and ethical thinking and a sort of political struggle going on. And I'm wondering if that, and you were mentioning about how this robbery is going on at the same time. And I keep wondering about that this, to my mind, wonders about what sort of, is this sort of like for policymakers a sort of dilemma? Because what happened in the past and what our political institutions now don't know how to make sense of all this and how that affects the academic.
Well, yes, very much so. I agree, 100%. The topic that you're opening up is, you know, we have several books that have been written about this issue, and it does create a huge dilemma because, in some sense, how does science go forward on these shaky foundations? There were those who would say, that doesn't matter, that was then, this is now. We have to make use of our knowledge and derive knowledge from what we can in these individuals and move on. There are others that say, no, that doesn't make it right, and we need to kind of follow this repatriation path. And it's a great dilemma. It's a dilemma that's going on right now as we speak, right here in Michigan. And it's relevant to all the museums in Michigan as they negotiate and are involved in returns today and in the near future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One question. Bringing you back to the title of did you talk about cultural connections in life and death? It caught my attention that the cliff dwellings and the way how they bury their dead ancestor. And in doing so, it just brings me an image back in South America, same practice, but, and I'm thinking, okay, this connection, cultural connection, it happened in Mexico, and similar is happened almost at the edge between Bolivia and Brazil. Mm-hmm. Same situation, and where they bury their ancestors and cliff.
Uh-huh.
So, did you find any type of connection, maybe some type of migrations?
I think it's such a general thing that, you know, people live with the ancestors in Africa, in Asia, in South America, in Central America. It's a very common practice. Yeah. In fact, the idea of having a separate cemetery is really the exception rather than the rule. So we live in a Christian Judeo world that emphasizes the cemetery. But in fact, it's much more common to place the dead in and around the places where people live because they actually act as a kind of anchor to the community, as any cemetery would. But I would not draw any but the most general parallel between that idea of burying people in cliffs or burying people in the floors of your house than the most general one. Except in this area, there's other aspects of the way they treat the dead in the ground that are very similar. The way that the bodies are wrapped, the way that the limbs are flexed, the way that they point them to certain directions, and things like that. Those are characteristics that are characteristics of a cultural group in an area and are part of the operating system of the culture. But there are these general similarities that I'm not really sure if they mean much in terms of identity as so much as a kind of a style of life. Agriculturalists tend to bury the dead as anchors in the land that they depend on.